Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to our Resolve the Unsolved forum promoted by Panacea eBiz Consulting. This is Sandeep Ghosh here. Today, we have a very exciting and I would say and look forward to an enriching session. And the topic is understanding people scientifically. Now, there have been a lot of discussions and a lot of suggestions and ideas within organizations specific to HR and senior management with respect to recruitment and identifying the right fit of manpower for their organizations. While doing so, while we have been interacting with various organizations, coaching and interacting with them, we were also surprised that sometimes people just go through resumes, not only at the junior level, even at mid-senior level and senior levels. And I would like to state it very clearly, make sometimes an ad hoc decision in terms of the profile and the person sitting in front of. I don't know how comfortable it is or how convenient it is to judge a person over half an hour, 1 hour of interactions with a resume over there. Yes, you can certainly make a lot of judgment and a lot of you will with your experience and your understanding. There's no doubt about it. So these has been the queries being raised to us, to some of our as consultants also across sectors by HR and entrepreneurs across sectors. That is where we were having a chat with Dr. Nivedita and we were exploring how to introduce the topic to the forum. So he proposed it would be understanding people scientifically, and in fact, people can be understood using scientific tools. So we thought it's a good opportunity where there's a lot of transition happening. We should have a very meaningful discussion around trying to analyze people scientifically and see if he or she, along with their technical skills and past experience, map closely with a specific work culture, a specific job role for which he or she would be recruited and expected to perform. Let me introduce our guest speaker today, Dr. Nivedita Srivastava. Dr. Nivedita is a founder and business psychologist at Nine Links, that is her own organization. She is a fellow of National Institute of Industrial Engineering, formerly known as National Institute for Training in Industrial Engineering. Her expertise lies in psychometric assessment for corporates. She has been into coaching and organizational development. And at present, she is engaged with large corporates where she is guiding and suggesting them and facilitating in appropriate recruitment processes. Welcome, Dr. Nivedita, to the session.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you so much.
Dr. Nivedita, in fact, to start off with the theme today, understanding people scientifically, I'd request as a psychologist, why do you feel it's important to understand people scientifically and specifically for the corporate culture? Please.
All right. So, Sandeep, here what happens is that it's obvious that we all come with our own set of biases. Which
Right.
is there's a lot of subjectivity that we experience day in and day out. For example, if I have to give a very generic example, so let's say if I come across somebody maybe during an interview session, and just because maybe he's technically very sound, but I'm not very impressed with his communication skills. And I mean, to be very specific, I'm not very impressed with his English language. It's not very fluent. He carries his own, tone and etc. etc. And because of my own subjectivity, because of my own passion for high-end English language, or people who are very good or very fluent with English language, I kind of don't look at other skill sets that he carries, right? So this typically, which we call as a halo effect, which we face day in and day out, whether we are in a corporate culture, in a corporate setup, or even in our personal lives.
True.
Just because we don't we do, or maybe let's say if I have a reservation towards some community, or if I have a reservation towards some region of the country or some region of the world, then I'm carrying my own subjectivity along with me. So to cut across or cut through these subjectivity issues or these biases personally, I think analyzing people scientifically or with the help of good tools is the solution that I think.
And you feel it's very important for corporates to do that?
Absolutely, because one is that we never see people in the absolute sense. So one of the most important, rules of any assessment, for that matter, is that it's not in absolute sense. So we are comparing people with a larger population. So even to understand whether he fits into, as you rightly mentioned during the initial phase of the webinar as well, to understand whether he fits into a particular role with the right skill sets is very important to understand. And again, just as you had again mentioned that just by looking at the CV, which is very easy to fake these days. Again, you have CV writers at any level, for that matter. You have people who craft CVs, and it's not so difficult to actually put across a very good image of yourself. So again, just glancing through a CV or even interviewing somebody will not help any corporate or any HR professional to actually look into a person inside out. So I think that's very important, parent, comparing an individual to a role specific, and also comparing two people or three people or to a larger, to 10 people among various candidates for the same position. That's where I think a scientific tool can help out.
That's wonderful. But what has been your experience? Like you have been like mentoring and coaching in the corporate segment and providing them assessment tools.
Right.
So, what has been your overall experience in terms of, do you feel find resistance to this entire process, or slowly the corporates are picking it up?
Well, yes. If we have to talk about a time which was, I would say, about 2 decades back, I started off my career with MAFA, which is now Randstad. So I
Yes.
started off my career, and I was again a psychologist with them. Used to work for a division called Assessment Practices. And yes, if I had to really look into, yes, there were large organizations which are still open, but maybe domestic companies, or large national companies, they were still very hesitant, because obviously if we have to look into it, the effort increases, because if your candidate if you have kind of selected somebody maybe through a personal reference, or maybe you have kind of liked him for some personal preferences, or as I said, the halo effect or something, but just in case he phase through the psychometric assessment, so the work definitely increased multifold for the HR professionals. However, now the trend has changed drastically, I would rather say, over the last 10 years. Yes. And all sorts of organizations, even MSME sector organizations, have become really open to understanding, because now they have realized that the cost to the company in terms of hiring and rehiring really reduces, because when you are studying or analyzing somebody scientifically through the help of psychometric tools which have been devised over a period of time, so obviously you are the chances or the probability of hiring or picking up the right fit increases. So obviously, the cost of rehiring definitely reduces. So now organizations have started realizing that, and then the trend has definitely changed.
That's wonderful. I think we did face a lot of resistance when we are trying to introduce such assessment processes. It's good to hear. Now, coming to a very, very important query which people have asked and raising it on their behalf, not now or today, but before. Who needs psychometric assessments? A very important question which has
Sure.
always.
All right. So, well, if we actually have to look into, so this is maybe before we answer this question, there's also a myth that, kind of circles around the whole term of psychometric testing or psychometric assessment for that matter. The biggest myth is that people think that it is all about only personality assessment or aptitude assessment.
Right.
That's one of the biggest myths. While if you actually look into the theory of psychometric assessment, it itself is a theory which is about assessing anything. So for example, if I have to get into a very different different set of examples, even your GMAT exams or your CAT exams are also constructed using psychometric testing as a theory. So when there's any standardization that happens, when there's any uniformity that happens, when a test is developed, when questions are put together and then they are studied on they are pilot studied, etc., so then that is all is psychometric testing. So by considering that as so even all these entrance exams that happen, they are also, so right from the students, people who are looking for a career, to corporates, definitely, to students who are in the undergrad courses or who want to pick up a discipline as a, or who are looking for various career options. That is like for the general for the students or the institution sector. But even going to the corporate sector, which is what is our focus of the webinar here. So again, there's a myth that psychometric assessments should only be used for mid-level or senior level management. Most people think that itna cost hai, so let's only focus for the mid-level or senior level, or let's just do that. But then eventually one of the visions of Nine Links, for that matter, is also to use psychometric assessment across levels and across sectors. So one of the basic premise of Nine Links is that 70% of any organization is filled with or is full of the blue collar workforce. So whether they are the ITI or diploma holders in a manufacturing sector organization, or if we take up a organization which is a retail sector organization or any service sector organization, again we have the frontline sales people, or we have the customer sales people, or if you look into the BPO, they typically occupy 70% of the organization. So why should you be ignoring them in terms of, why not spend a little more in terms of hiring them, using these tools and making lesser mistakes in hiring. So as I was just to reiterate, it's across organizations, across sectors, and across industries. So I think everybody needs psychometric testing for that matter.
See, a pertinent question comes in if I'm playing the role of a promoter or an entrepreneur or a senior person in an organization. You used a very pertinent parameter, cost, right? So this has been always there. The cost may not be in lakhs; it is in sometimes few hundreds, sometimes few thousands.
Sure.
Now, I'm raising it on the behalf. If I do a behavioral or scientific assessment, what are the things will I be able to observe or get out of that assessment, which I will not be able to understand or analyze if I'm meeting the person across the table?
Right. Sure.
Because I think you, as an expert, must have faced these queries. So this happens.
Right. So very well put up question, Sandeep, is that so I'm sure you would also agree to this fact that at least in the mid-managerial level or the leadership level, people get too seasoned with interviews. They kind of learn the art of appearing for interviews, with their own aura and with their own level of confidence. And eventually they tend to impress people during this half an hour or 45 minutes interview at best. But again, can any recruiter or any HR professional or any leader for that matter, could be a functional leader as well, not necessarily an HR leader as well, is he or can he or she be very sure that during that half an hour they have been able to understand how flexible they are at their workplace? Will they be at their workplace, or will they be able to tolerate the kind of pressure or stress that the job will create? And most interviews are always done in individual settings. So during the interview, can you ascertain whether they'll be a good team player? right?
Okay.
Would they be a real firefighter, or how ethical would they be, right? So there are multiple skill sets which one requires for any job profile, for that matter, irrespective of what job profile it is. There, as we always say, as organization development consultants, is that, and the basic theory of competency mapping, that there are certain generic skills and then there are certain specific skills. So irrespective of whatever the job profile is, there are many generic competencies as well. So can a recruiter, or as I was just saying, that an interviewer, during that half an hour, 45 minutes, how much can he assert, be very sure that yes, I have been able to look into this person inside out, and I'm very sure. However, with the help of psychometric assessments, since they are put into very, and most new age psychometric tests are ones which are based on situations. So
Right.
then they are put through multiple situations, and that is where, and again, as going back to the topic of it, and then they compare to a larger population and assess scientifically. That's where somebody can be very sure of, yes, that I'm at least 80% sure or 75% sure that yes, whatever is the result is close to the reality of the individual.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I anyway favor it. I know it. But since you are present, I thought of raising these queries because we have been consistently facing that.
Sure.
And I got an opportunity to work with very leading corporate psychologists also. And we have interacted with you also, and you have also suggested them. Now, coming to a very, very important parameter as we go forward, when you mentioned about psychometric assessments, what are the current trends in psychometric assessments?
Sure. Right. So again, if we have to look into a situation or the type of psychometric tests which were available maybe 2 decades back or 3 decades back, so the world was talking about personality assessment when it came to any kind of assessments correlating to or referring to the corporate sector, or if we had to look into from the career options perspective for, then it was largely aptitude assessments. But then over a period of time, the shift has the shift has happened from personality assessment to skill based assessment or behavior based assessments, because personality is something, as as psychologists we often say that personality is pretty fixed by the age of 15, right? So you can't modify personality. All these courses which say that there are personality development or personality changing, there are very extensive situations which change a personality. Maybe a personality changes when there's a sudden moment of certain grandeur which has happened, or a sudden loss. Then people change as personalities, right? But eventually what changes is behavior. So the world is talking about skills. So I think just personality assessment has become quite obsolete. However, all respect to the old school tests which are still available, and they eventually work very well for many organizations. All due respect to them. But the world is talking about skills. So not only for technical skills but also for employability skills, which are which are, some of them are common across levels, and some of course vary as per one goes up the hierarchy. So that's where the trend has changed from just personality assessment or aptitude assessment. The trend has changed from to more to skill based assessments. So when we say skill based assessments, these are largely from the non functional perspective. They're largely employability skills. So one is assessing their how good are they in the collaboration skills, or stress management skills, or or adaptability skills. So then that's where the shift has changed. So most good psychometric tests now focus on skills. And again, the type of questions also have changed, as I just mentioned, that now they are more situation based questions, wherein a person is put through multiple situations and analyzed as to how would he react in certain situations. That's where, so just assessing personality, as I was just saying, that has become quite obsolete, because if I just tell you that he's an extrovert, so just being an extrovert really doesn't help anybody. So is the personality preference of being an extrovert, is it fitting into a particular profile? So
Right.
again, the other trend, of course, that I should be mentioning here is that most psychometric assessments also, or personal behavior assessments, should also be looking into the job fitment. So again, if for example, if I have to give you a very simple example here in this, so we would typically say that an extrovert would be quite a fit into a role which is of a sales or a marketing profile, obviously, because he has to step out of his office, step out of his room, step out of his his own comfortable zone and meet people. Until he does that, he or she does that, obviously he will not be able to perform well. uh, on the contrary, we often say that somebody who is more for a desk job, maybe let's say an accounts professional, or again, maybe let's say somebody who's into audits, should more of be an introvert, because he has to confine himself from various reasons, from from kind of even security issues of data for that matter. So the more extrovert he is, the lesser, the bigger threat he is to the organization. So that's where these kind of preferences, of course, that's where I think, as I was just mentioning, that fitment of personality traits or behavior skills into a particular role is what is the is what is the need of the hour now.
So you are saying it's very, very specific to the role
Yes.
which is there. And that makes sense, I think. While we are speaking, Dr. Nivedita, there are a couple of queries which are also cropping up. I'll read them out for you.
Okay.
Nidhi says, what are the tools being used these days? He is referring example, MBTI, DISC, etc. So the question is, what are the tools being used these days?
Right. So, as I was just saying that, of course, all due respect to, the old time or the old school test, MBTI. But yes, MBTI is a very well developed test, no doubt about it. But MBTI could be used under very restricted purposes. MBTI is a test which can never be used for recruitment purposes. And again, recruitment being one of the biggest users of such psychometric testing. So MBTI cannot be used for recruitment purposes, primarily because MBTI is a test which is based on type theory, and type is nothing about but preferences, and people's preferences change over time. So I'm sure you would also agree to it that maybe back those days when you were in college, for that matter, you would have loved talking to a lot of people. You would have probably had a lot of friends. But now, as probably you have, you have kind of moved to the next phase of your life. So maybe you have restrained yourself from being an extreme extrovert to maybe more of an ambivert, or maybe an introvert as well. So that's about all about preferences. So since the stability of these preferences is not even guaranteed by MBTI, so it's not a test which is recommended for recruitment purposes. However, for team building exercises, or for something which is a for a short term thing, or even for learning objectives, yes, MBTI could be a good solution. DISC is, again, it just looks into 5 parameters, or rather 4 parameters. So again, it's a very short test, but yes, again, it's very well done. But as I was just saying, that the new age skills don't look at personality traits, but they look at behavioral skills. So there are many more organizations which have come up in the last 3-4 years, 5-10 years rather, for that matter. And of course, we being one of them. So and again, these tools specifically look into skills assessment, and again, just not personality or behavioral skills, but also into cognitive skills as well, which we often propagate that for any role, irrespective of whatever level it is, even if it's for leadership level, besides a lot of behavioral skills, a lot of cognitive skills also stand important to understand how mentally agile the person is. Is he still able to comprehend data? And what is his attention to detail still very high? So that's, again, it's a composition of both behavioral skills and cognitive skills.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. In fact, I think competency in terms of analytical capabilities are more in demand nowadays, right?
Right, of course, yes.
Great. Anybody has any queries, feel free to unmute and you can raise it, because Dr. Nivedita prefers more interactive session, which is there, or you can type in your queries over here as we move forward with it.
Sure.
Now, to take it to the next level, Dr. Nivedita, there is one more question which I noted down while we were talking. Now, how does one decide which is a good psychometric test?
Sure.
There are so many of them. So how do I decide?
Right. So one is definitely, I'm sure Sandeep, you would have heard about. There are two types of tests for that matter. One is definitely ones which are objective, and the ones which are projective techniques.
Yes.
So I'm sure you would have heard about a test which is called TAT, which is a very popular test and extensively used in NDA exams or SSB exams by DRDO. And again, it requires a lot of skill to even score those tests. So again, that's where I think the corporates have not been able to reach that level of assessing psychometric testing, which are based on projective tests, projective assessments. But then coming to the objective test, so there are certain parameters of any psychometric test for that matter. One is definitely the reliability of the test. So when we say the reliability of the test, it is about, like, let's say if on a on a particular scale of, let's say, adaptability, if today I am, let's say, on a scale of 1 to 10, let's say I'm today 8, so the reliability of the test should be so good that even if, let's say, if I am assessed even after 6 months, I cannot be, probably my score could be 7 or 9, but it cannot be 3. But if the score changes to 3 while 6 months earlier I was 8, then that's not a good test, because the reliability of the test is definitely a question mark there. And also the other criteria of a good psychometric test is the validity. So when we say validity here is, if I have to give again a very simple example, let's say it's a test of mathematics, and I ask a question, when was Taj Mahal built? So it is obvious that it is not a question of mathematics, but it is a question of history for that matter. So again, the validity of the test means that, does the test assess what it intends to measure? So again, if we are talking about certain behavioral skills, but if we are talking about, let's say, analytical skills in that test, so then again, it is not a valid test. And the third, which is again very important, uh, is the norms of the test, or the sampling which has been done. The larger the sample on which the test has been developed,
Okay.
obviously it takes a lot of time to develop a good test. So the larger the sample, the credibility of the test definitely increases, because then one is able to compare to multiple of thousands of people. So obviously the sample on which, so any good test over a period of 2 or 3 years should at least have a sample of multiple of thousands. So these are certain criteria that, and of course the objectivity of the test, so anybody should be able to score it objectively. So that is something which is like a criteria of a good test.
So, listening to what you have been sharing, Dr. Niveda, in the last, say, 15, 20 minutes, it has been quite enriching and informative. At this stage, what I have experienced and sharing, and I want you to clarify, and
Sure.
the inputs which I have received from various entrepreneurs and CEOs. Most of the organizations, when they are asked to provide an assessment process during recruitment, does not have one. The system does not exist.
Sure.
The system exists, a resume comes in, somebody has a look into it, okay, engineering, so many engineering done, okay, fine. 15 years experience, 15 years experience done. And as you rightly stated at the initial stage, with my experience, or if I have experience of 15, 20 years, I can very well create a profile.
Absolutely.
I can very well handle an interaction 45 minutes to 1 hour comfortably without a person able to make out what is my depth. 1 hour is nothing.
True.
Okay. Now, why I'm raising this question at this stage is, we have been talking about different tools. Mr. Murli raised queries about certain tools which you proposed may be good at a particular point of time, but we have evolved beyond that. So the question I know organizations are facing is, if I need to put an assessment process, like you proposed, the validity about a test is important. So you feel that it is an important investment for an organization to do, right?
Right.
And if these are not done, there are chances that we will be recruiting people. They may have qualifications, technical qualifications, no doubt, 15, 20 years, 5 years experience as relevant. But as you pointed out, the job role fitment can become a larger issue which we will only explore when they start working. Am I right?
Right, absolutely.
So, how does a tool in psychometric or a psychometric assessment or a scientific tool helps out in this?
Sure.
Can we discover all those in the process?
Yes, definitely. So, for example, if I have to share, a typical case study, we are working extensively with a Bangalore-based startup,
Okay.
and they are hiring, in multiples, and all of these roles are quite technical. So one would often question that since the role is so technical, all I'm looking at is IT skills. Why should I really take that pain of, doing a psychometric test or you know but then our solution to this is that, again, maybe it's a desk job, maybe he doesn't have to interact with people, but again, uh, maybe currently he's more of an independent worker, but obviously he will not be in that stage forever, right?
Okay.
So he would, maybe he's a independent worker right now, he's just an IT programmer at this moment, but 2 years down the line you might probably promote him to be a team leader,
Okay.
where there'll be multiple skill sets then just as IT skills that will make more sense. So maybe he need more managerial skills, he need more team leadership skills, he need more coping skills for that matter. So then again, just on the basis of his technical skills or IT skills, which one would have reviewed during the interview, obviously cannot give an in-depth input on these. And obviously we look at people from a long term perspective, we never hire people just, we just, that maybe it's just matter of 6 months and then he any which ways leave. We always are kind of, we look forward that this person should stick around.
No, I
And
know.
yes, and then again, these tests have extensively helped in curbing attrition as well at work.
Okay.
Because obviously, when you have been able to understand that whether this person fits into your organization, even culturally for that matter. For example, we work extensively for an India-based MNC, of course, which is into electronics. And they have their own competency clusters, they have their own leadership culture, and they want people to be assessed whether this person fits into their culture, its culture in itself or not. They are not really bothered about comparing this candidate to some other industry or some other competitor company for that matter, but they would want to see whether he fit into their culture or not.
Ah,
So that again is one of the areas in which understanding people from that perspective helps organizations. And yes, since I was just saying that we look at people from a long term perspective, not from a short sighted perspective, that today maybe he's just doing an IT skill or maybe he's just looking at something which is very, but you obviously look at them from a long term perspective, that they would probably be the future leaders of the organization. Do they have those right skills at an optimum level? Obviously people learn and grow over their careers, over their career path, but do they have that basic optimum level at all or not? If there's a skill set that is completely missing, so then obviously they are not, you're just wasting your time on getting them on board. So that's where I think most organizations should look at some form of assessment some way or the other. Just interviews is probably old school now. I would rather say that ways.
no, it's true. It's very, very important to say it outright because we have either promoters or people involved in recruiting with us aligned. So it's
Right.
very important.
Sure.
Taking it to the next level, uh, how can psychometric assessment help organizations? And very specifically, since we have been talking about recruitment, okay, if you can share your thoughts on this.
Sure. Right. So recruitment being one of the most popular, I would say the popular objectives of psychometric assessments across the world for that matter. Most organizations look at psychometric assessment for recruitment purposes. Yes, that's needless to say that there are direct outputs of that. But yes, one of the other important objectives of psychometric assessment is also identifying their training needs or their learning and development needs, right? So maybe as a manager or as a line manager, one might feel that okay, let's say somebody is not performing well, so we might just say that that his performance is not well, let's put him to a team building exercise. But is it what that this individual really needs? Maybe not, but just because you feel that or you think that it is part of your training calendar, so and we have to put them. And let me tell you, Sandeep, I have known of organizations where an individual is expected to complete n number of training mandates or training days,
Definitely.
and just because they are kind of deficit of, let's say, 10 hours of
Yeah.
training days, they're just made to sit in some training program, some random training program, which might be very irrelevant for them,
True.
right? So that's where psychometric assessments have helped organizations extensively, forward looking organizations, in identifying what are their training needs, right? And again, needless to say, scientifically, so maybe if his performance is poor, maybe it could be that he's not able to withstand the stress at work, and that must be the area which is of concern. So putting them to an intervention which is taking care of the stress is probably the right solution, rather than to put him into some random training program which one feels that is the solution, but it might not be the case. Secondly, and again, coming, I think the third area would be career planning. Again, becomes very imperative here. So obviously, when you upskill people to the next level, and which area should they be working on, whether they should be looking into the leadership role, or it could be a cross functional role for that matter. Again, psychometric assessments could help identify which career path could be taken care, or could be decided for a particular individual.
Okay.
One of the important, while we were setting up this organization, and we were doing some primary research with various large scale organizations, in terms of identifying that if at all psychometric assessment is to be used in the organization, what would be the areas in which they would use. And one of the organizations, again, French cosmetic organization, they said that they would also use it for understanding the compensation benefits that an individual should deserve.
Okay.
So it could be another way of looking at it, that if you have to compare two people and if they are from the same role, so obviously basis where do they stand on all of these skills, one could even decide on the compensation benefits that, or other increments that could be certain for an individual for that matter. So yes, these are some of the hardcore, I would rather say, or the top objectives or benefits of any psychometric testing. Again, to add on to it, it could help in team building exercises, in terms of identifying who could play what role. There's a very famous test which is a very popular, very well known test, which is called Belbin's, and typically it is used to understand which role an individual should take up in any team. So there are about nine team roles, and Belbin's talks about these 9 team roles. A
Okay.
very interesting test, and that could again, depending on what is the objective. And again, as I was just mentioning, that MBTI is a test which is typically for learning and development purpose. It can never be used for recruitment purpose. So depending on what is the purpose, a good psychometric test should be chosen and administered.
So that means the team needs to have access to an expert who understands this
Yes,
area,
true.
who can recommend appropriately what could be the right assessment tool at any point of
Absolutely.
time
Sure.
in the stage. Now, moving on from here, if anybody has any queries, you can raise it. I can see Mr. Murugan also there. Mr. Murugan, you have been contributing uh, quite often in our webinars. You can feel free to raise your queries or add on. Welcome.
Sure. Thank you, Sandeep. Nivita, you have given a good overview of this psychometric importance and everything.
Sure.
See, there is also the strength finder. Because, say, I want to know today, I don't want to recruit a person who has done something actually. Instead, I want to know what is his capability more than what he has done. Because what he has done for another organization may not suit me actually. So I want to assess what are his strengths, how can I use his capabilities and everything. Can you throw some light on the strength finder?
Sure. So, Mr. Murugan, very well put that yes, you would not be interested in understanding what he has done in the previous organization. So, again, these new age tools actually put people into various situations. And how do they perform under? So, these are like mini simulations, I would rather say, little simulations. And how do they perform on it, on many of these simulations for that? So obviously one can identify which are the areas of concern and which are their key strengths. So depending on what key strengths they have, you could actually put them through various other roles or responsibilities, and kind of make the best out of their skills. And yes, if there are certain areas of concern or areas of development, so again putting them through various learning and development programs could also help them upskill. So these new age skills actually tools actually help in assessment of skills, rather than just whether boxing them people into an extrovert personality or a introvert personality. They emphasize more on skills. So that's where an psychometric test can help in a certain which are these strengths of an individual, and how again depending on the job profile, how could you maximize their strengths.
Yeah, like as you said, personality of a person is fixed at the early stage and everything.
That's
Okay,
right.
instead of focusing on his weakness and everything, if I can personally develop my strength, when my
Right.
strength become bigger and bigger, even the
Sure.
weakness become very small, and then it goes away. So mostly I prefer for my team members or the people whom I recruit and everything to undergo a strength finder test, which is
Right.
available for 1,000 rupees nowadays,
Sure.
and then select. So it can be also treated as one of the recruitment tool, correct?
Absolutely. True.
Thank you,
Thank
Nimit.
you.
Very important discussion, Ms. Murugan. Thanks for your intervention. It's very, very critical because see, we have been sharing. Coming to the contest, let me just put it upfront. In my previous, nowadays I consult, fine. In my last job also when I appeared, what I did was, along with my resume, I submitted my complete profiling for the job
Right.
to my boss before the interview. I said, you need to go through my profile very clearly to understand me, which is important. Now, every organization which we have seen, currently, I'm not naming the organization, I'm associated with three of them. Since you raised IT and Mr. Murugan rightly put a new perspective to the current skill requirements, this organization has done senior recruitments in the last 4 to 5 months during COVID and at present also.
Sure.
And high cost people. Despite reminders, no assessment was done except interviews. We raised a question to the management today. So you have all the four key people at high cost still trying to figure out, the organization is trying to figure out their productivity and the output. And they are on the fifth month. One into business development, into high area of manufacturing. Okay. And these are high cost people, means at least beyond 1.5 a month.
Right.
So typically, even skill assessments in terms of behavioral, in terms of high value sales, okay, people are not measuring it out. Not that you only psychometric, but they could take help of various assessments.
Absolutely. I mean, assessment development centers are for that purpose, actually, wherein
So
it's not psychometric testing, but you have various other tools to assess them.
Okay. So if I may ask you at this juncture, and what Mr. Murugan also raised, if we are recruiting people specific to companies' business development, right? And this comes invariably from companies which are large engineering companies who always have the question key, the person is so qualified, XYZ company which is there. And what we have seen is the non-performance exists the moment the company is not very strong. But the company expects a lot out of them. So a person who comes in for business development into an organization, senior level, okay?
Right.
In this case, what kind of a scientific tool, or is it possible to scientifically measure their patterns? Is it possible?
Yes, so for that matter here, Sandeep, I would rather propose that instead of just relying on one particular psychometric tool for that matter, for that extensive a role, for that high, high level of a role, one should really rely on just one particular tool, but instead go in for an assessment center. So again, these assessment centers are nothing but, wherein you put them through series of tools. So these series of tools basically include psychometric tests for that matter, apparently, and also maybe case studies which are relevant to that role, then simulation exercises or even role play for that matter, and putting them through multiple tools and having multiple people assess them should be a right way of looking at least at a leadership level. assessment. So
So what you mentioned, if I need to understand where are these tools and where are these assessment centers available, how can I access them?
yeah, so there are consultants and consulting organizations, which do that. Our team as well, again, does that. So these tools, are designed specifically to specific roles, and that's where multiple assessors again assess multiple people for that matter, and that's where a comparative analysis is done, and then that's where it helps organization, especially in hiring anywhere from mid-manager level to leadership level. So again, these assessment center, the tools also vary from profile to profile and organization to organization as well.
So, Dr. Nivedita, do you recommend, suppose an organization, small or large, irrespective, everybody has a cost to recruitment, and manpower is a expensive resource for any organization
Sure.
and a very important resource. Is there a way they can set up a process where assessment is an involved part of it or regular part of it, and chances of making costly errors are avoided?
Sure. So, in fact, this is a question which many organizations often ask us, that at what stage of the recruitment process should we take up psychometric assessments? So, one is definitely when you are doing mass recruitments. So it could be, you're kind of, let's say it's a greenfield project and you are hiring people in, volumes. So obviously it could be a test for elimination. So you gather people, you run a psychometric test, and you eliminate people who are not even at least up to an optimum level, or at least to an average level. So one is that, yes, so when you are hiring people in masses, at any level for that matter, when you have a flood of resume, so how do you even screen out resume for that matter? But yes, if that is not the agenda, wherein the ratio is, let's say, a smaller ratio, and let's say, typically when I talk to my recruiter friends, they say the ratio has gone as bad as 1:7. So they
Okay.
have to screen 7 resume to find one fit profile. So that's how earlier, I think maybe 10 years back, it used to be 1:3. Now it has become 1:5, 1:7 for that matter. At times in certain organizations, it's even worse. It is 1:10. So then again, would we as psychologists, or would we as any psychometric assessment company, should we be, kind of propagating that, yes, you should be doing psychometric tests for everybody? Let's say the ratio is 1:7 to all 7. We wouldn't rather propose that, because I would say it's a unnecessary cost to the organization. Why would you want to put all 7 people to be tested on a particular psychometric test? But rather we would propose that, let's say, you would want to do the psychometric assessment just before the final round of an interview. So maybe if your interview is a 3-layered interview process, so one could be just the elimination process, the second could be maybe the functional level of assessment, and the third could be, let's say, the HR leader perspective, or maybe the team leader, whatever is the process. But just before the before the final round of an interview, if psychometric assessment is conducted, then obviously it helps organizations in making mistakes and identifying, or maybe taking care of an error which might happen just because of just conducting an interview all throughout the process. So you are just making sure that your observation is in correlation to a scientific tool. So at times, yes, we have come across, for example, maybe I could quote a case out here. And we work with a small finance bank, and we've been doing assessments for them for a long time now. And eventually we also assess people's integrity, and it's a very unique way in which we do it. It's a very gray area, I'm sure you will agree to it, assessing integrity. So we never box people into high, low, or medium integrity, because it's like whether you steal 2 rupees or you steal 2
Right.
crores, you're still being unethical, right? Or if so we put people into 2 levels, which is the acceptable level and which is a non-acceptable level, which we have compared to a larger population through a pilot study. So that is like the icing on the cake of our test. And when we were doing this assessment for a small finance bank, the integrity score of one individual came out to be unusually low. And that is where our confidence on our psychometric, on a psychometric test, and also integrity test also came out, turned out to be confidence increase, because when it was, correlated to his CIBIL score, it turned out to be pretty low.
I see.
So yes, so that's where the organization was also kind of, they were saved from doing a mistake in hiring somebody and rolling out an offer letter just because of the psychometric test, because they went back to his CIBIL score and they realized that yes, if they would have hired him or her, him for that matter, then obviously they would have, kind of got into deep trouble.
This is very interesting exercise. In fact, for the financial institution integrity,
Sure. Right.
Okay, so we can test the integrity of an individual. That's
Sure.
great. Great. Uh, Great. It was enriching. Friends, anybody has any questions, you can raise it. You can unmute and raise your queries over here. And in fact, what happens is slowly organization, in fact, online tools are also coming up right now where assessment will be easy. And in fact,
Right.
people have been facing this problem, what you shared, Nivedita, like huge amount of resumes, shortlisting
Yes.
is an issue. Resumes are very professionally done, so trying to find a way out of it is not so easy for even an experienced manager until and unless a person is put onto a job role and they start seeing what is the
Actually.
impact.
Yeah.
And in fact, going through a pre-confirmation level, you have an assessment tool which gives you some kind of an input. I think it makes sense for everybody.
Definitely.
For corporates also. At least the organization has some informed choices.
Yeah. Even for freshers, for that matter, you might probably say that he has hardly stepped into the working profile. What kind of working skills would he have? But there are many skills that can give an idea as to whether he's even open to learning. So you
Yeah.
might just hire him on the basis of his IT skills. But if he's not open to learning, you might put him into 6 months of training, 6 months of probation. But if he's a closed box, then eventually you're spending that time in training him on certain skills, but he's not open. So that could be a setback for both the organization and the individual as well. So there are certain other skills which can even help in hiring freshers. So that's how.
No, sure. It was great. I don't see any more queries coming up.
Sure.
So, Dr. Nivedita, it was great. In fact, it was quite enriching, I would say. You shared a lot of reasons why an organization, small or large, should go in for a scientific assessment of an individual before rolling out that important offer letter. And as we all know today, scientific tools are already available to us. So I feel that uh, each organization should make use of it. It helps even the person who is helping an organization recruit the right resource. Even if they are a consultant or an individual can suggest such a process. And for an organization, it's a very, very important tool. And if there are any queries, feel free to write to us or you can reach out to Nivedita. Thank you. Thank you, Nivedita, once again.
Thank you so much, Sandeep, for the opportunity. It was a lovely discussion, lovely interaction. Thank you. So,
thanks, everybody. And we'll connect again next week over a new topic. Bye-bye. See you all. Thank you.